coffee.
You can have your coffee ready.
But now that it's 9:30, I actually drink it at home. But that's why we're late.
I didn't get my Diet Dr. Pepper this morning. Diet Dr. Thunder. That's better, honestly.
Oh!
It is. I haven't drank regular pop in a long time.
You realize by moving that up there, that he tells me I need to do that every Wednesday night, right?
That's you.
I know, that's what
He actually moved it for me last week. All right, we are in Revelation chapter 17. Hopefully we'll get it finished out today. And then, like I said, Holly and I are going to be gone for 2 Sundays. So we won't pick up until sometime, second Sunday in January. Oh, yeah. There's the kids, too, isn't there? Well, someday. Anyways, Revelation 17. I tell the kids all the time. Like, one of these days, you guys will be gone. Mom and I can just go do what we want. Revelation 17. All right, we got down to verse 6, if I remember right? We got started in verse 7? Yeah, start verse 7. Okay, perfect. All right, that's what I thought we did. So we're looking at the harlot and the beast. And so we've talked about a little bit about both, of course, the description of each. The harlot, what did the harlot represent? Remember Rome, right? It represented Rome. The beast represented the emperors, which kind of fits within, I think it fits within the rest of the book. Revelation chapter 13 talks about these different beasts that are going to come up. And one represented the emperors, one represented the influence of the emperor worship and things along those lines. And so that fits within chapter 17 in that theme. We see the harlot as the one that was seducing, right? And as we finished up in verse 6, we talked about how the harlot was drunk with the blood of the saints, right? What did that represent? Yeah, she was out to kill the Christians. Rome was enjoying that murdering of the saints. And so we bring it into this picture of John here. Remember, he's been carried away to see this vision. He has seen the scarlet beast, this scarlet woman, this harlot, who is riding upon this beast, and she's excited and happy and drunk with the blood of the saints. And what happened to John? What was his reaction, I guess? He was in shock, right? It says he marveled. Well, I think the better word was he was astonished. I think yours said astonished, didn't it? And so that's really the better word. He was just shocked with what he saw. And it really just kind of points to today. I thought a lot about this again this week. I know I've had the notes done since a couple weeks, but thinking about it this week, there's a lot of similarities with today because of the things that are going on, and people you open up. I open up my news app and I read articles of things that are going on, and it's just crazy of the things that people are doing and think is fine. And it just shocks you. Even though you've seen it the week before, the day before, it still shocks you every time you open it up. And that's the picture I think of John. He knew what it was like, but he was just shocked that it was such an enjoyment for those that were killing the Christians. And so, verse 7 then, it says, "But the angel said to me, 'Why did you marvel?'" I think that's interesting. The angel is saying, why did you marvel? Why are you shocked by what you see? Maybe it was because the angel said that, was thinking, you should know these things already. Why are you shocked by this? Maybe that's the case. I don't know. But John was he was shocked. He shouldn't, maybe the thought is he shouldn't be shocked because he's already seen this going on in his life. But maybe it was more the fact that sometimes, there's that feeling of, that continued shock every time you see this. And the angel, is just going, you should know this. And so with that question, continuing on in verse 7, the angel says, I will tell you the mystery of the woman and of the beast that carries her, which has the 7 heads and the 10 horns. And so the angel is now going to use the rest of this chapter to really describe to John what he's seen. This angel will outline the vision, give its description, similar to what Jesus would do. Sometimes Jesus would give a parable, right? And he sometimes would not give the meaning. He would just leave it for them to interpret and to think about. But sometimes he would. Like I think of the parable of the sower, right? He gives us this parable of the sower, and later on in the chapter, the disciples ask, can you give us the meaning of this? And he does. That is the picture we get in here. John is seeing this vision, and the angel's like, all right, I'm going to give you the meaning. And so we're told what the beast is, and it's not exactly, but we're told who the harlot and all of that is and what is going on. And that's the rest of the chapter. And so he outlines, so verse 8, it says, the beast that you saw was and is not, and will ascend out of the bottomless pit and go to perdition. And those who dwell on the earth will marvel, whose names are not written in the book of life from the foundation of the world, when they see the beast that was and is not and yet is. Now that's interesting. The phrase that's used here. First, it's used in the first part. The was is not, and then at the end of that verse it says the was and is not and yet is. What does that sound like? And we have a description of Jesus, right, in the book. What is the description given of Jesus? It's kind of similar to this, I guess you could say. He is the what? Alpha, the Omega, the beginning, the end. What does that represent? He's all of it, right? He's eternal. He's always was and always will be. This one's a little different, right? This description of the beast, it says he was and is not. And then it says at the end, and yet is.
My translation's different. It says that was and is not and yet will be.
Yes.
Makes a lot more sense.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it does. Because as we talked about, the beast represents emperors, right? I think and as we're going on through this chapter, he's going to talk about the different kings that are shown here. But this picture here is the beast, in a sense, will rise to terrorize, will punish, then fall down and rise again another day. I think that's kind of the picture that we see here. And so that represents the different emperors that are going to come, right? You have Nero, who rises up to power. What does Nero do? Persecutes the Christians, right? That was previous to this writing in John. So Nero has already terrorized the Christians. Now he's gone. But then he rose up somebody else, right? Another emperor is doing the same thing. Is that emperor going to last forever? No, he's going to die. Then another one's going to rise up. But this is going to continue to a point where it's going to end. I think this points to a rise and fall of different emperors that are going to terrorize Christians, but then it's going to stop. So the contrast of Jesus, right? Jesus is the Alpha, the Omega. He's not going to end. He's always going to be there. He always was and always will be. These emperors, yes, they're going to rise and fall, but they're also going to end. And it's not going to happen anymore. Yeah.
I guess something else that I kind of think of when I hear this is thinking about the emperors that were and the emperors that will be, but then is not. So they're not constant. Some emperors were much worse than others.
Yes, for sure.
Some were pretty tolerant, others were fair.
Yep.
So
Yeah.
it's not a constant of just bad, okay, bad, okay.
Yeah, that's a good point, because it really is, because there was some, Nero was really bad, I don't know all the emperors. We have a list later. Augustus, Tiberius, Caligula, Claudius, Nero, Vespasian, Titus, Domitian. Not all of them were bad, but they all did some. But there were some that were worse, for sure.
I have a question
yeah.
about the first part of this verse.
Yep.
And I mean, I don't want to make us go astray or anything.
Uh-oh.
You know, like, they always talk about that after you die, you go to paradise and then you go to heaven.
Mm-hmm.
So is this saying that the bottomless pit is where evil men and angels are held until judgment, and then they go to the lake of fire?
So, the bottomless pit we've seen before.
Because I've never heard those 250. I mean, I've always thought they were the same.
Mm-hmm. So the bottomless pit we talked about, I think it was in chapter 13. It said that, or maybe it was 12, where come out of this bottomless pit, the beast or the dragon come out of the bottomless pit. I think the bottomless pit represents the realm of Satan. It's his influence and his realm. So it would be the demons and things like that. Maybe it's not really a place as much as it is the control, the influence that Satan has. I don't know. Does that make any sense?
The Haitian realm is supposed to be divided into two sections.
It is.
And you know, we always talk about where we will go is paradise, because that's where we want to be, and that's, you know, that's our goal. But where do the other people go, just, you know, before they go to?
So the Haitian realm, there's paradise and there's torment in the Haitian realm. There's a gulf fixed between, as the picture we're given with Lazarus and the rich man. And so we don't see anyone come out of that area. The only person that ever did would be Christ, right? Because Christ went to paradise in Hades for 3 days and came back out. No one else does. So I don't see this as you have the devil that's in the torment place and the demons, and they're coming and going as they need to. No, I think this is not really a place. It's a pointing to his realm, his control. Yeah, so that would still hold to the fact that we have a paradise and a place of torment waiting in Hades for those. But I don't think that's what it's talking about here. Because the perdition that's talked about there, the bottomless pit and go to perdition, that is destruction. And so the Hadean realm, they're coming in from that influence of Satan, where the dragon was pictured as coming out of, and then they're going to be punished after that. So, that make any sense? Maybe?
Yeah, because I mean, I had down the perdition was the lake of fire, I guess.
Yeah.
It just seemed like they were talking about two different places.
Mm-hmm.
And so I didn't know if that was, they was putting a correlation to.
Yeah, but I don't think that the bottomless pit that's pictured here is an actual place. It's not the torment place of Hades. Because if anyone leaves the Hadean realm, then the only person to ever get out of the Hadean realm would be Christ, because he came back to life. He was the firstborn, as we're told in 1 Corinthians 15. He is the firstborn of those that will come be alive again. And so I don't see anybody else being able to besides Christ.
So you don't think this could be a picture of Judgment Day, because that would happen on Judgment Day? They would leave there and go to
No, because these last few chapters have not been focused on judgment. It's just been focused upon Rome and its destruction. So that was a good question, though, because we think of the bottomless pit. In other places, we think of it as hell or Hades.
Right.
Yeah. But I don't think that's the picture given in the book of Revelation. I could give you some more verses. I have to go back and look. But we talked about the bottomless pit where the dragon came out of in
Because
times
it also
past.
talks about the names not written in the book of life.
Mm-hmm.
So,
Yep. And so those that were not written in the book of life were those that are followers of Satan. And so that book of life, it says those that were not written in the book of life will marvel. Now that's not the same marvel, right? So remember I talked about how marveling in the sense of John, it has different meanings. So in the context of John, he was shocked. In the context of those that are not written in the book of life, they are amazed. They're admiring. They're following this son of perdition, in a sense, this beast. And so, let's see, go down. All right, so going back to that was and was not, Dan Cates had this quote I thought was good. I put in here. It says, "There is always another Rome ready to rise." That is what we see here. And so he's talking about there's always going to be a rise of someone else to fill this spot. And throughout history, there has been, right? There's been different nations, different people that have tried to rise up and just to hurt the church. But ultimately, as we're going to see in the rest of this chapter, who wins? God does. God, Christ, is the Alpha, the Omega. These emperors, these terrorizers will come and go, and their end will come, and that will be the end. And so, verse 9, it says, "Here is the mind which has wisdom. The 7 heads are 7 mountains on which the woman sits." And Leif talked about this last week. Where was Rome situated? 7 hills, right? Or 7 mountains. And so here we're getting a description. It says that this, what verse was that? Lost my place. Verse 9. "Here is the mind with the wisdom. The 7 heads are the 7 mountains which the woman sits." And so the woman harlot is sitting upon this place, which would be, in a way, could reference Rome. Now, 7 has meanings, right? Doesn't have to be literal 7 hills. It could be. But 7 has meaning, right? It has meaning of completeness. And so she's sitting upon this complete, ultimate power that she has an influence over the world at that time, which we've talked about. In verse 10, it says, "There are also 7 kings. 5 have fallen, 1 is, the other has not yet come. And when he comes, he must continue a short time." So you go back to verse 8, it talks about the was, is not, and yet is. We're seeing that picture here in verse 10. It says there were 7 kings, 5 have fallen, that was the one. 1 is, that is now, and the other has not yet come, that's the ones in the future. So these are all tying together in that picture of those that rise and fall in power and influence and control, but to terrorize the world. Now, Barclay, which is a commentator, so who are these 7 kings? Well, is it literal 7? I don't think so. Some hold to that. Barclay, he says the 7 kings are Augustus, Tiberius, Claudius, Caligula, Claudius, Nero, Vespasian, Titus, Domitian. So those 7 have been seen in time. I mean, it could be those, but I don't think that it represents just one person. I think that it's just talking about their power and control that they have. It says 5 have fallen, 1 is, and is yet to come. So maybe 5 of those first 5 are gone, then we're at this 1, and then there's going to be more to come. I don't know. It's like I said, remember we talked about this, kind of hard to pick out every single detail from this chapter and point to it. Holly?
Because the timeline of when this book was written fit with those kings that are listed.
Yes, it does fall on those timeline, yes.
So it could be.
Titus, he destroyed Jerusalem. So Domitian would be, it'd be around that time of Titus to Domitian.
If I'm not mistaken or remembering incorrectly, were real bad, and some of these were like Leif was saying they weren't so terrible.
Mm-hmm.
I kind of remember you talking about that in school.
Yep. Yeah, that's right. And so, it could be, that's why some commentators will pick out 7 and say, well, these are the 7 that's talking about. Vespasian was the one that started I'm trying to remember history here. Vespasian was the one who started the conquer of Jerusalem and destroy Jerusalem in AD 70. Titus is the one that finished it out. So if you think 5, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 Vespasian, Titus is 6. So that time frame of the destruction of Jerusalem through when John is writing this, it could be. So it could be. I don't know. Like I said, I don't know exactly. I do know that it represents those emperors of Rome. And it's pointing to the fact that some of them have come up, some of them have fallen, and some are going to still come and cause problems for Christians.
I think that it could be something referring to the 5 that have fallen, the other empires that have oppressed
I don't know.
And now the one that is right now is Rome that's pressing at that moment.
Oh, didn't think about it that way, but it could be.
Just thinking
But-
about the statue with the head of gold and the chest of silver.
Yeah. Let's see. It could be. I mean, it could be. It's hard to determine what this is. No, it's not literal.
But that just kind of came to mind here. So.
Yeah, for sure. Like I said, it's a difficult couple passages here. This specifically, 10 through 13, was talked about. And so, verse 11, it says, "The beast that was and is not is himself also the eighth, and is of the seven, and is going to perdition." And so, it says that there is some that are coming in the future. This is pointing to when an end, the perdition, the destruction of Rome is going to happen. It's going to happen in the future. So John is living in a point where it's still happening, yet Rome is going to see their end in one of the emperors in the future. And it could point to two that are later. So if it is these seven, then after Domitian, there's going to rise up one more, and that's when it's going to fall. I don't know. Like I said, is it literal? I don't think so. It's just pointing to the fact that it's going to end. And so verse 12, it says, "Then the 10 horns, which you saw are 10 kings who have received no kingdom out of yet, but they receive authority from 1 hour as kings with the beast." And so it says that these 10 horns represent 10 different kings. Now, we've seen 10 horns throughout Scripture before. Daniel talks about 10 horns. He talks about 10 horns and then one horn that's going to arise that's different than the others. That's Antiochus. It points to Antiochus, which Antiochus was way before this time. But we see that imagery before of you having kings and representing of the 10 horns. And that picture is used here of describing future kings that would come. That could represent emperors that were going to come. It could represent nations that will be conquered, that will become a part of the Roman Empire and align their lives and wickedness with them. That kind of fits within context. But they are described as having one mind, right? Receive authority for an hour as kings with the beast. They're one with this beast. They're at one with Rome. They're joining in with that same sin, that same fate that is going to come. And so, like I said, verse 10 through 13, I'm not 100% sure on the detail. But that changes in verse 14. Because notice verse 14. It says, "These will make war with the Lamb, and the Lamb will overcome them, for he is Lord of lords and King of kings, and those who are with him are called chosen and faithful." It doesn't matter exactly who each one of these kings was or what it's specifically talking about. We know it's talking about Rome. We know it's talking about the emperors because of the context of the time. But verse 14 tells us directly, they're going to make war with who? Christ, the Lamb. Who's the Lamb? It's Christ. And who's going to win? Christ. Why? He is the Lord of lords. He is the King of kings. These nations are going to hurt. They're going to persecute Rome specifically at this time. They're going to do everything they can to stop Christianity. They're going to make war against Christ, right? Is it literally against Christ? No. Why is that? Well, how is it then they're making war against Christ directly? Think about Matthew 25. What did Jesus say in Matthew chapter 25 to those that... Well, let's just go there real quick. Let's draw this picture, I guess. Matthew 25. We'll start in verse 33. Matthew 25, verse 33, it says, "And he will set the sheep on his right hand, but the goats on the left. And the king will say to those on his right hand, 'Come, you blessed of my Father, inherit the kingdom prepared for you from the foundation of the world. For I was hungry, you gave me food. I was thirsty, you gave me drink. I was a stranger, you took me in. I was naked, and you clothed me. I was sick, you visited me. I was in prison, and you came to me. Then the righteous will answer him, saying, Lord, when did we see you hungry and feed you, or thirsty and give you drink? When did you see a stranger and take you in, or naked and clothe you? And when did we see you in prison and come to you? And the king will answer and say to them, Surely I say to you, inasmuch as you did it to the one of the least of my brethren, you did it to me. When we do something to Christ's sheep, who are we doing it to? To Christ. So Rome was persecuting the Christians, which are the sheep in the fold of Christ. Therefore, who are they hurt? Who are they at war with? It wasn't the Christians, it's Christ. And so here, this picture is of the Lamb who is the shepherd of his fold. They are hurting the Christians, but ultimately they're going to see their end because Christ is the King of Kings. He is the Lord of Lords. He has ultimate power. And he will overcome any nation or people who will try to stop the church. In the end, God always wins. What is the theme? What is the picture of the book of Revelation? God always wins. And if we are on his side, we win. What was the picture given there at the end of verse 14? Those who are with him are called chosen and faithful. What was the picture given in verse 8? Those that were not written in the book of life will fall into the same fate, right? But the picture given here, those that are on the side of the Lamb will have victory. And so, yeah, we may not understand exactly everything a part of this chapter, but verse 14 is pretty pointed, and we can understand exactly what it says here. And so that brings us to verse 15. It says, Then he said to me, the waters which you saw, where the harlot sits, are people, multitudes, nations, and tongues. Now we talked about this. Remember in the beginning of the book, the picture that John saw was of the harlot who sat on many waters. Well, that description here is the waters represents the world. And so Rome ruled the known world at this time. The nations were tricked and deceived into following and to start to turn. But here the picture is given. They're sitting on waters. Verse 16, it says, And the 10 horns which you saw in the beast, these will hate the harlot, make her desolate and naked, eat her flesh, and burn her with fire. What does that sound like? So you have the harlot who is deceiving these other nations, but now we're given a picture when their destruction is coming. What is happening to the harlot? They're meeting resistance. It is, but they're turning on Rome. Rome's own people are fighting against each other. They're turning on. All these nations are now, that were at one point deceived, are now turning on Rome. And Rome's seeing its destruction. The nations that were tricked and deceived will start to turn on the harlot. This is the nations in Rome eating each other alive. Now, is this picture seen in Scripture? Somebody read Revelation 18 and verse 6. Revelation 18 and verse 6.
Render to her just as she rendered to you, and repay her double according to her works. In the cup which she has mix double for her.
All right. Chapter 18 is that fall of Babylon the Great, which we're going to see represents Rome. But they're getting what they deserve, right? Their wickedness has been full, and they're seeing their demise. Somebody read Galatians 6 and verse 7. All right, so what we sow, we reap, right? And that sentiment is set throughout history, seen throughout history. But let's turn to Ezekiel 16 to kind of get a picture of what we're talking about here. It's a little bit of it's not really that long a reading, but verse 35 through 41. Somebody want to read that? Or I can read it if nobody wants to. Ezekiel 16, 35 through 41. This is talking about Jerusalem. So Ezekiel is writing to Jerusalem. And remember, we've talked about how they were described as a harlot too, who were deceiving and causing deception for other nations. 35 through 41.
Now then, O harlot, hear the word of the Lord. Thus says the Lord God, because your filthiness was poured out, and your nakedness and covered in your harlotry with your lovers, and with all your abominable idols, and because of the blood of your children which you gave to them. Surely therefore I will gather all your lovers, with whom you took pleasure, all those you loved, and all those you hated. I will gather them from all around against you, and will uncover your nakedness, to them that they may see all your nakedness. And I will judge you as a woman who breaks wedlock or shed blood are judged. I will bring blood upon you in fury and jealousy. I will also give you into their hand, and they shall throw down your shrines and break down your high places. They shall also strip you of your clothes, take your beautiful jewelry, and leave you naked bare. They shall also bring up an assembly against you, and they shall stone you with stones, and thrust you through with their swords. They shall burn your houses in fire, and execute judgments on you in the sight of many women. And I will make you cease playing the harlot, and you shall no longer hire lovers.
All right, so now this is not literal, but we see here Ezekiel is giving them a picture of those that they had played harlot with, the harlotry with, those that they had aligned themselves with are now going to turn on them because their wickedness found them out. God said, your end is coming because of your wickedness. And that's going to be the picture that they have of Medo-Persia coming in and Babylon coming in and destroying them and carrying them off into captivity, killing many of them. And so that same picture is given to us in Revelation 17 of the one that the harlot played harlot with, the one that she deceived, which was Rome. Those people are now going to turn on her. And it's going to be a part of her demise. And so, verse 17, it says, for God has put it into their hearts to fulfill his purpose, to be of one mind, and to give their kingdom to the beast, until the words of God are fulfilled. God says this is his purpose. He's going to use them as his purpose to punish Rome. Has God done that many times in the past? Babylon was God's people, not his people, but he used Babylon, right, to do what? To punish Jerusalem. But who did he use Medo-Persia to punish? Babylon. Who did he use why did he use Greece to hurt Medo-Persia? Because of their wickedness. God uses them to punish, and he's going to use those nations to punish Rome. Wayne Jackson had this quote. It says, in the Old Testament, the Assyrian nation came against Israel as the instrument of divine wrath, though he meaneth not so. Isaiah 10, verse 7. Cyrus overthrew ancient Babylon at the Lord's bidding, though the Persian ruler did not even know the Lord. Jehovah can use evil powers to enact his sovereign will and then punish the instrument. So also, with the situation under present consideration, her day of doom was on the calendar somewhere. Her day of doom was coming, and those that she made herself aligned with, Rome did, is now going to end them. And so we're seeing this happen again. So God's always in control, isn't he? He's always in control. And it says here, this is his purpose, and this is his goal. And so, verse 18, it says, and the woman whom you saw in this great city which reigns, the woman who you saw in this great city which reigns over the kings of the earth. That's talking about Rome. This great city that was ruled over the nations of the world this time is Rome. And so we're always reminded that God's in control, right? Somebody read Romans 13, one last verse 1 through 2. Romans 13, 1 through 2.
Let every soul be subject to the governing authorities, for there is no authority except from God, and the authorities that exist are appointed by God. Therefore, whoever resists authority resists the ordinance of God, and those who resist will bring judgment on themselves.
So the picture we're given by Paul in Romans 13 is there is not one person in authority that is not there because God, they are there because God put them there. I'm going to word that right. There's not one power, one position of authority in this world that's not there because God didn't put them there. Okay? And so think about that with all of these nations. God put people in position for a purpose throughout history. And when we get to this picture of Rome, God put those rulers there maybe for their demise, right? It may be because a nation is deserving of what they're getting. And so, the leaders that we have may be a result of our actions. And so think about America today. America is very influential. America is very powerful in this world. But yet, who is in control? God is. No matter where a nation gets to, how great and powerful they are, God is always in control. Rome was at a point where they thought they could never be destroyed. Yet who brought them down? God did. And so that's the same reminder for us today as we relate it to today. No matter how great America may be, there may be a time where God says it's enough because he's in control.
So you believe everybody's put in by God today still?
I do, yeah. Romans 13, Paul tells us that for sure. So there may be a reason why they're there. They're there because either that's what the nation needs or deserves at that point. It may be, but God tells us, and I don't think that just falls within the realm of president or things like that. I think that falls within any position of authority. God puts them there for a reason. And so, yeah, I don't think so. Because Paul wouldn't have told us that in Romans 13. Let every soul be subject, because we're to be subject to whatever power is in control because God put them there. And as you continue in the context, they're there to do terror to good works, but to evil. They're there to be a governing power that goes about to either reward or punish those that are doing good or bad. So, yeah, I fully believe that. Because if it wasn't, then we didn't need to submit to government. Because if you look at that context, verse 4 of Romans 13 says, "For he is God's minister to you for good. But if you do evil, be afraid, for he does not bear the sword in vain, for he is God's minister, an avenger to execute wrath on who he practices evil. Therefore you must be subject, not only because of wrath, but also for conscience sake. For because of this you also pay taxes, for they are God's ministers, attending continually to this very thing. And so render their, to Caesar. And so if we go against our nation or go against those that are in authority, we're actually going against God because he put them there.
Well, you have to also discuss corrupt governments, because there's no way you're going to convince me that killing Jews back during the Holocaust because that's what Hitler wanted was the right thing to do.
Well, Babylon was used to punish Jerusalem, but they also did a lot of terrible things. But God used them for a purpose.
Right.
But you think about the current time that they were living in. They were living during the time of Nero.
Right.
And then you have 1 Timothy chapter 2, it says, pray for all your leaders, which points to Nero.
Right, but
So,
obeying them when they tell you to do something that's wrong is not right.
yeah. No, it isn't. No.
Acts chapter 5, we talked about that.
Exactly. If they're doing something against what God says, then we don't listen to them for sure. That's a principle of Acts chapter 5. That's a whole different subject. I kind of just touched on it a little bit, but that is a whole different subject. But we are to look at our those in authority as we're to respect them because it's like we're showing our respect to God, and so because of the authority.
The specific person or the position that's put in, the office of the president, not necessarily the person who is the president.
I don't know.
Is that too broad?
I think it's too broad. Not sure. It's a different study. We can study that, I guess. Good questions.
I think if
Yeah.
too, because especially with the time, how the past few years have been, I don't think that would be.
Yeah, and then you look out through history, and there's a lot of terrible people.
A lot of terrible
Um,
governments.
Yeah. And,
Getting elected these days.
huh?
Still getting elected.
Yeah, and there's still ones getting elected today, yeah.
Well, it's important because, as we all know, history repeats itself, so if we don't keep ourselves up on that, it's going
Mhm.
to continue to happen.
You know, and as we see with Rome, rulers that were put in brought about their demise, and that was part of the purpose, I think, of God, was the rulers that they had continued to cause Rome to be turned upon itself and fight against one another to end. And so that ruler was probably there to bring about the purpose that God wanted was their end. And so when you think about rulers throughout history that were terrible, maybe they were there to see the demise, the end of their that country's reign and things.
Go back and look at like Stalin and Mao and Hitler in the countries that they were ruling and see what was going on politically or morally, that God was like, yeah, I'm not you, so here's a ruler that you serve.
Yeah.
Because they committed terrible atrocities against their subjects.
Yeah. I don't know. It's good. It'd be a good study. We should do it then. Is that a topic for next year? It could.
There are a few of those three that just come to mind, but I'm sure there's much more.
Yeah. I think that'd be good to study. All right. Thank you guys. We're out of time.